At my granddaughter's Christmas recital, my daughter's mother-in-law grabbed my 8-year-old by the wrist, dragged her off the stage, and told her she was an embarrassment to the family name. Her son, my son-in-law, stood 3 feet away and did nothing. Then he leaned over to my daughter and said, "Mom's right. She wasn't prepared. This is what happens when you don't push her hard enough." My jaw tightened. Not from helplessness, from discipline. I straightened my coat, walked to the parking lot, and made a phone call. They had absolutely no idea who they were dealing with. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening from in the comments. The invitation had come through a group text. My son-in-law, Martin, had added me to a family chat 3 days before the event. Lily's Christmas recital, December 17th. Street, Andrews Academy, 6 p.m. Don't be late. That was it. No greeting, no warmth. Just instructions delivered like I was hired help. I drove from my townhouse in North Vancouver across the Lionsgate Bridge to West Vancouver that evening. The kind of drive that gives you time to think, especially when you're 67 and you've learned that family gatherings with the Beaumont family always come with conditions attached. Street Andrews Academy sat on a hillside overlooking the ocean. Private school. Tuition somewhere around $40,000 a year, which Martin's mother, Diane Beaumont, reminded everyone about regularly. She'd insisted Lily attend the moment she turned 5. My daughter, Sarah, had wanted Lily in the local French immersion program, but that conversation had ended the way most conversations ended in the Beaumont household. Diane decided. I found a seat near the back of the auditorium. Sarah spotted me and waved, but she didn't come over. Martin was beside her, and Diane was beside Martin, and the invisible hierarchy that governed my daughter's life kept her in her assigned position. I waved back and settled into my chair. The recital began. Children in pressed uniforms performed Christmas carols, read poems, played instruments. Lily was scheduled to play piano. She'd been practicing for weeks. Sarah had told me over the phone, her voice carrying that fragile pride mothers have when they're not sure if pride is permitted. "She's been working so hard, Dad. She really wants to do well." I'd heard the piano through the phone during our calls. Lily playing the same passage over and over, determined to get it right. She reminded me of Sarah at that age, stubborn in the best possible way. When Lily walked onto the stage, I sat up straighter. She wore a navy dress, her brown hair pulled back with a ribbon. She looked small under the stage lights, but she sat at the bench with her back straight and her hands steady. She began playing Silent Night. The first verse was beautiful, clean, careful, each note placed with the kind of concentration only a child can produce. Then, in the second verse, she stumbled. A wrong note. She paused, found her place, continued. Another stumble near the bridge. She recovered again, finished the piece, and stood to bow. The audience clapped. Most of the parents smiled with understanding. Children make mistakes. That's what recitals are for. But Diane Beaumont was already on her feet. I watched from the back row as Diane moved down the center aisle toward the stage. She walked with the posture of someone who believed rooms existed for her to enter. Diane was 64, immaculately dressed, the kind of woman who wore pearls to a children's Christmas concert. She owned Beaumont and Associates, a boutique real estate brokerage that handled luxury properties across the North Shore and Whistler corridor. She mentioned this within minutes of every introduction, usually followed by the value of her most recent sale. Lily had barely stepped off the stage when Diane intercepted her. I couldn't hear the words from where I sat, but I saw Diane grip Lily's wrist. I saw Lily flinch. I saw my granddaughter's face crumble from nervous pride into shame in under 3 seconds. Then Diane pulled her toward the side exit, away from the other families, and I heard her voice carry across the hall. That was humiliating. I told your mother to hire a proper instructor, not let you stumble through a performance at my expense. Do you know what people think when a Beaumont child performs like that? Lily was crying. Trying not to, the way children do when they've learned that crying makes things worse. I stood and moved toward them. Sarah was already there, reaching for Lily, but Martin blocked her with his arm. Mom's right, he said, not even looking at Lily's face. She wasn't prepared. This is what happens when you don't push her hard enough. Then he turned to Sarah. I told you to get her extra lessons. You never listen. Sarah's mouth opened, then closed. I'd watched this pattern for 6 years. My daughter, who had graduated top of her class at UBC, who had run a successful graphic design business before Martin convinced her to give it up, reduced to silent obedience by a man who measured her worth by his mother's approval. Diane still had Lily's wrist. The child was pulling back, trying to free herself, and Diane tightened her grip. "Stand still! Beaumont women don't squirm!" With her other hand, she grabbed Lily's chin and forced her face upward. "Look at me when I'm speaking to you. You will practice 4 hours a day until the spring recital. No arguments. No excuses." Lily whimpered. Diane released her chin with a small push that made Lily stumble backward. My hands were steady. My breathing was even. 67 years of life, 38 of those years as a senior Crown prosecutor for the province of British Columbia, had taught me exactly how to behave when witnessing something that required action. You don't react. You document. You proceed through proper channels. Emotion is the enemy of consequence. I walked past them, through the side exit, into the parking lot. December air hit my face. Rain was falling lightly, the way it does on the North Shore, more mist than rain. I pulled out my phone and made 2 calls. The first was to Constable Rachel Okafor at the West Vancouver Police Department. Rachel had been a witness in a case I'd prosecuted 12 years ago, a complicated fraud matter involving a development company. She'd since risen through the ranks. I had her direct number because she'd sent me a card when I retired, one of dozens from officers who'd worked with me over the decades. "Rachel, this is Robert Aldridge. I've just witnessed what I believe constitutes assault on a minor. An adult female physically seized and manhandled an 8-year-old child in a manner causing visible distress. Location is Street, Andrews Academy, West Vancouver. I need officers to attend and document. Mr. Aldridge." Her voice shifted immediately. "Crown Prosecutor Aldridge? Former. But my instincts haven't retired. I have the incident fresh in memory, and I'm prepared to provide a detailed statement. I'll have a unit there in minutes. Are you safe?" "I'm fine. The perpetrator doesn't consider me relevant." "That's a significant miscalculation on her part," Rachel said. The second call was to my former colleague, Janet Firth. Janet had spent 25 years prosecuting domestic and family violence cases for the Crown. She'd retired the same year I had, but still consulted for victim services agencies. "Janet, I need your guidance. My granddaughter. Tonight, I'll tell you everything, but I need to know the current process for reporting suspected child abuse through the Ministry of Children and Family Development. I want everything done correctly. By the book. No room for procedural challenges." Janet's voice hardened the way it always did when children were involved. "Tell me what happened, Robert. I'll walk you through every step." I returned to the auditorium. The recital had ended. Families were gathering coats and chatting. Diane was holding court near the refreshment table, laughing with other parents, her public face seamlessly restored. Lily sat alone on a bench near the door, her wrist red where Diane had gripped it, her eyes puffy. Sarah sat beside her, arm around her shoulder, whispering comfort into her hair. Martin was talking to another father about a ski trip to Whistler. He hadn't checked on his daughter once. I sat down on the other side of Lily. She leaned into me immediately, her small body pressing against my arm. "I messed up, Grandpa," she whispered. "You were brave," I said. "You made a mistake and you kept going. That's not messing up. That's courage." Grandma Diane said, "I embarrassed the family. Grandma Diane is wrong." Sarah looked at me over Lily's head. Her eyes were wet and exhausted and something else. Resigned. She'd been resigned for years. I'd watched it happen gradually, the way you watch a river erode a bank. Sarah's opinions dismissed. Her friendships discouraged. Her business abandoned. Her identity compressed into the role Diane had designed for her, Martin Beaumont's wife, which meant, functionally, Diane Beaumont's subordinate. I'd known for a long time that things were bad. Sarah rarely called anymore. When she did, conversations were short, careful, full of topics she steered around. She'd lost weight. She'd stopped taking photos, something she'd loved since childhood. The camera I'd given her for her birthday sat in a closet. When I'd asked about it last Thanksgiving, Diane had said, "Sarah doesn't have time for hobbies. She has a household to manage and a daughter to raise properly." The household, of course, was managed according to Diane's specifications. What Lily ate, what she wore, what activities she pursued, all filtered through Diane's approval. Martin enforced his mother's decisions without question, and Sarah had learned that resistance brought consequences. Not physical. Diane was too calculated for that, or so I'd thought until tonight. The consequences were emotional, withdrawal of approval, passive remarks about Sarah's background, pointed comparisons to Martin's ex-girlfriend, whose family apparently had the right connections. The Beaumont family home in British properties was worth somewhere north of $6 million. Diane had mentioned this at every gathering I'd attended. She'd also mentioned the value of her jewelry, her membership at the Hollyburn Country Club, her connections to Vancouver's social circles. She measured human worth in assessed value. My townhouse in North Vancouver had cost me $480,000. I'd paid cash from my pension and savings. It was clean, quiet, and mine. Diane had visited once, 4 years ago, looked around with the expression of someone inspecting a disappointing Airbnb, and never returned. She'd referred to it since as Robert's little place. I hadn't corrected her. I hadn't corrected any of them. Not when Martin called me by my first name with the tone of someone addressing service staff. Not when Diane suggested I couldn't afford proper Christmas gifts. Not when she told Sarah that marrying into a family without connections had been a step down. Sarah knew what I'd done for a living. She'd grown up knowing her father was a crown prosecutor. But the Beaumonts had never asked. Not once. They'd seen the modest townhouse, the simple clothes, the quiet manner, and drawn their conclusions. Martin had asked Sarah once, early in their relationship, what her father did. Sarah had said, "He worked for the government." Martin had nodded and never inquired further. Government work, to the Beaumonts, meant bureaucracy, low status, unremarkable. They didn't know that I'd prosecuted some of the most significant criminal cases in British Columbia's history. They didn't know that defense attorneys had called me the Wall because I'd never lost a major trial in 38 years. They didn't know that 3 sitting judges on the BC Supreme Court had been junior counsel in my office. They didn't know that the Attorney General had personally asked me to delay my retirement twice. They didn't know because they'd never bothered to look past the surface. And I'd let them. Because people reveal themselves when they believe they're dealing with someone powerless. The police arrived 11 minutes after my call. 2 officers entered the auditorium as families were leaving. Constable Okafor wasn't among them, but she'd briefed them thoroughly. They approached Diane near the exit. Professional, courteous. "Ma'am, we've received a report regarding an incident involving a child this evening. We'd like to ask you some questions." Diane's face cycled through confusion, irritation, and indignation in rapid succession. "I beg your pardon? This is a school Christmas recital. What incident?" The officers glanced at Lily, who was standing beside me, her wrist still visibly marked. One officer knelt. "Hi, sweetheart. Can you tell me about those marks on your arm?" Lily looked at me. I nodded gently. "Grandma Diane grabbed me really hard," Lily said quietly, "because I made mistakes on the piano. She said I embarrassed the family." Martin stepped forward. "Officers, this is a misunderstanding. My mother was simply correcting my daughter's behavior. It's a family matter. We'll need to document the child's injuries," the officer said. "And we'll need statements from everyone present." Diane drew herself up to full height. "Do you know who I am? I'm Diane Beaumont. Beaumont and Associates. I've sold properties to half the West Vancouver City Council. This is preposterous. Your identity has been noted, ma'am. We still need your cooperation." I stepped forward. "Officers, I'm the one who placed the call. Robert Aldridge. I witnessed the incident in its entirety, and I'm prepared to give a full statement. I should mention that I documented the sequence of events immediately afterward. Timestamps, descriptions, the visible injuries on my granddaughter." One officer's eyes flickered. "Aldridge, are you?" "Robert Aldridge, the Crown Prosecutor, retired." But yes, the silence that followed had weight. Martin's face drained of color. Diane's mouth opened, then closed. The officers straightened almost imperceptibly, the way law enforcement does when they realize they're speaking to someone who has spent 4 decades on their side of the system. Crown prosecutor, Martin repeated. His voice had gone thin. 38 years with the BC Prosecution Service, I said. Senior Crown Counsel, Western Region. Diane stared at me. I watched the recalculation behind her eyes. Every insult, every dismissal, every time she'd called me a nobody living in a little place, every assumption she'd built about who I was and what I was worth. That's impossible, she stammered. You live in North Vancouver, in a townhouse. Crown prosecutors aren't required to live in mansions. Mrs. Beaumont. The officers took statements from everyone. Sarah's hands trembled as she spoke, but her voice was steady. She described not just tonight, but a pattern. 6 years of Diane's controlling behavior. The constant criticism. The way Diane undermined her parenting at every turn. The way Martin deferred to his mother in all things. Lily's increasing anxiety. The nightmares that had started last year. Martin tried to intervene twice. Both times, the officers redirected him. Diane attempted to leave once. She was informed that leaving before statements were complete would be noted in the report. By the time the officers departed, they had detailed statements, photographs of Lily's wrist, and the beginning of what I knew would become a file with the Ministry of Children and Family Development. We drove home in my car, Sarah and Lily in the back seat. Lily fell asleep before we crossed the Lions Gate Bridge, her head in her mother's lap. The city lights reflected off Burrard Inlet, scattered by rain. Dad, Sarah said in the darkness. A Crown prosecutor. 38 years. Yes, they never knew. Martin never knew. All this time they treated you like someone unimportant. Yes. Why didn't you say something? Even once. I watched the road. The windshield wipers marked time. Because I didn't need them to respect me for my title, Sarah. I needed to understand who they really were. People show you their true character when they think there are no consequences. Diane and Martin showed me exactly who they are. Sarah was quiet for a long time. I should have left years ago. You're leaving now. That's what matters. At my townhouse, I set up the guest room for Sarah and Lily. The room was small but clean. Lily's eyes half opened when Sarah laid her down. Are we at Grandpa's house? Yes, sweetheart. Good. I like Grandpa's house. It's quiet here. Sarah and I sat in the kitchen afterward, drinking tea. My kitchen was simple. Pine table I'd had for 20 years. Mugs from a shop in Granville Island. No pretension, no performance. Just warmth. What happens now? Sarah asked. Tomorrow I'll contact Janet Firth. She's the best family violence prosecutor this province has ever produced. Now she consults for victim services. She'll guide us through the reporting process with the ministry. I'll also call David Chen, family law. He's represented clients in my cases for years. He'll handle your divorce. Divorce. Sarah said the word, like she was testing its weight. That's your decision, not mine. But you should know your options. Martin will fight. Diane will hire the most expensive lawyers in Vancouver. Let them. David Chen has never lost a custody case involving documented abuse. And Sarah, everything is going to be documented. Every incident, every pattern, every bruise on Lily's wrist. My phone buzzed. Text from David Chen, as if summoned. Heard through the grapevine. Happy to help the Aldridge family. No charge for the initial consultation. Call anytime. I showed Sarah the message. She started to cry. Not the careful, controlled crying I'd seen from her in recent years. Real crying. The kind that comes when pressure finally releases. The following weeks moved with the deliberate pace of proper process. I knew this rhythm intimately. I'd driven it from the prosecution side for nearly 4 decades. Now I watched it from the family's perspective, and I made certain every step was followed correctly. The Ministry of Children and Family Development opened a file based on the police report and my formal complaint. A social worker visited Sarah and Lily at my townhouse, conducted interviews, photographed Lily's fading bruises, documented the pattern of behavior Sarah described. The social worker was thorough, compassionate, and clearly experienced. She'd seen cases like this before, wealthy families where money and reputation functioned as armor against accountability. David Chen filed for divorce and an emergency protection order within the week. The order was granted immediately, prohibiting Martin and Diane from contacting Sarah or Lily. Martin's attorney, a senior partner at a Bay Street-connected firm, fought the order aggressively. David responded with evidence, not just from the recital night, but from the years of documented control. Sarah had kept a journal, hidden in her closet, recording incidents going back 4 years. She'd never told anyone about it. She'd been too afraid. Now it became the foundation of the case. I made phone calls, not to manipulate, not to pull strings, simply to ensure that existing systems functioned as they were designed to function. I called a former colleague at the Canada Revenue Agency's Enforcement Division and mentioned that Beaumont and Associates might warrant a closer look. I didn't fabricate anything. I'd heard rumors for years, through my legal network, about Diane's creative accounting, luxury properties with suspicious pricing, cash transactions that didn't quite add up, commission structures that seemed designed to obscure income. I contacted the Real Estate Council of British Columbia and inquired whether Beaumont and Associates had ever been audited for compliance with anti-money laundering regulations. They hadn't. I suggested they might want to look into it. I reported nothing that wasn't true. I created no evidence. I simply directed attention toward questions that should have been asked long ago but hadn't been, because Diane Beaumont's social connections had functioned as a shield. Sarah watched me work from the kitchen table, the same table where we'd had our first conversation that night. "Dad, is this what being a Crown prosecutor was like?" "Partly. The courtroom is the visible part. The real work is preparation, documentation, ensuring that every piece of evidence is properly obtained, every procedure correctly followed, every argument built on foundation rather than emotion. But the CRA, the Real Estate Council, you're directing all of this. I'm reporting concerns to appropriate regulatory bodies. Diane built her empire on a foundation of shortcuts and deception. I didn't create her problems, Sarah. I'm simply making sure the right people ask the right questions." 3 weeks after the recital, the CRA opened a formal audit of Beaumont and Associates. The preliminary findings were significant. Over $700,000 in unreported income over 5 years. Suspicious transactions linked to properties in Whistler and the Sea to Sky corridor. Diane's accountant, upon learning of the audit, immediately retained his own lawyer, which told everyone everything they needed to know. Martin, meanwhile, made his situation worse at every opportunity. He violated the protection order twice. Once by showing up at Lily's school, once by sending threatening emails to Sarah through a friend's account. David Chen documented both violations. The court was not amused. Then the embezzlement emerged. David's forensic accountant, examining financial records subpoenaed during divorce proceedings, discovered that Martin had been diverting funds from his employer, a commercial development firm, into accounts controlled by his mother's company. The amounts exceeded $350,000. His employer filed a criminal complaint. The RCMP's Financial Crimes Unit took over. Martin was arrested on a Wednesday morning in January. The same week, Diane was formally charged with assault, causing bodily harm to a child under Section 267 of the Criminal Code. I attended Diane's bail hearing, not as counsel, as a witness, as Lily's grandfather. I sat in the gallery and watched Diane Beaumont, luxury real estate queen of the North Shore, stand before a provincial court judge and answer to charges of hurting my granddaughter. Her attorney argued for minimal conditions, citing her community standing and lack of prior record. The Crown prosecutor, a young woman named Priya Sharma, who had actually interned in my office 15 years earlier, presented the evidence methodically. My documentation, the photographs, Sarah's journal entries, Lily's statement to the social worker. Judge Thompson set bail at $25,000 with conditions including no contact with Lily, mandatory counseling, and surrender of her passport. Diane's face contorted as the conditions were read. She turned and found me in the gallery. Her eyes carried something I'd seen 1,000 times from defendants. The stunned recognition that consequences are real. Outside the courthouse, Diane's attorney approached me, a well-dressed man named Jeffrey Parsons. "Mr. Aldridge, my client is interested in discussing a resolution." "I'm not the Crown, Mr. Parsons. I'm a witness. Your client's case is in the hands of the justice system she assumed would never touch her." He studied me carefully. "They told me you were relentless. They told you correctly. The months that followed brought the kind of systematic accountability that I'd spent a career facilitating from the other side." Diane's trial ended in conviction. The evidence was overwhelming. Her own behavior in court, imperious, dismissive, visibly contemptuous of the proceedings, did her no favors. Judge Thompson sentenced her to 18 months of probation, completion of a parenting and anger management program, 200 hours of community service, and registration on the Provincial Child Abuse Registry. The Real Estate Council revoked her license, pending their own investigation. The CRA assessment, when it came, totaled over $400,000 in back taxes, interest, and penalties. Beaumont and Associates closed its doors in March. Martin pleaded guilty to fraud over $5,000 to avoid a trial. 18 months at a federal institution in the Fraser Valley. Full restitution ordered. His marriage to Sarah was dissolved the same month. Sarah and Lily stayed with me through the winter and into spring. We settled into a routine. I cooked breakfast. Sarah worked on rebuilding her graphic design portfolio. Lily did homework at the kitchen table and told me about her day. On weekends, we hiked the trails on Grouse Mountain or drove up to Squamish. Lily discovered she loved the ocean. We spent hours at Ambleside Beach, watching container ships move through the inlet. Sarah found a job in April, creative director for a small agency in Gastown. Good work, good people, the kind of environment that valued her ideas instead of silencing them. She started looking for an apartment in East Vancouver, close enough for weekly dinners, far enough for independence. One evening in May, I received a call from Jeffrey Parsons. "Mr. Aldridge, my client, Diane Beaumont, has requested a meeting with you. She says she wishes to apologize." I considered. Saturday, 10 o'clock. The coffee shop on Lonsdale. Public location. I arrived early. Ordered a flat white. Watched the rain through the window. Diane appeared at exactly 10, a punctuality that survived from her previous life. Everything else had changed. The designer wardrobe was gone. The pearls were gone. She looked smaller, older. She sat across from me with her hands folded. "Thank you for meeting me," she said. "You have 5 minutes, Mrs. Beaumont." She nodded, accepting the boundary the way defendants learn to accept boundaries when the alternative is worse. I prepared a speech, wrote it out. But sitting here, I realized none of my prepared words are adequate for what I did. She paused. I grabbed my granddaughter, an 8-year-old child. I hurt her because she played a wrong note on the piano, because a wrong note, to me, was a reflection on the Beaumont name, because I was so obsessed with appearances, so certain that my standards were the only valid standards, that I confused control with love and cruelty with discipline. She stopped, breathed, continued. "I've been in counseling since the conviction. Twice a week. It's forced me to examine things I spent 60 years avoiding. The entitlement, the need to control, the way I raised Martin to believe that wealth made our family exempt from basic human decency." I watched her face. 38 years of evaluating witnesses, defendants, and everyone in between had given me a finely calibrated sense for performance versus authenticity. Diane's hands were shaking. Her voice cracked at the edges. This wasn't the polished Diane Beaumont who'd once lectured rooms full of people about excellence. This was someone sitting in the wreckage of her own making, trying to find honest words. "I don't expect forgiveness," she said. "I haven't earned it. I just wanted you to know that I understand what I did, what I was, and I'm trying, for whatever that's worth, to be different." "What about Lily?" I wrote her a letter. My counselor helped me with it. Age appropriate. No excuses. I brought it for you to read first. I want Sarah to decide whether Lily ever sees it. She slid an envelope across the table. "And my daughter?" I asked. Sarah deserved so much better than what my son and I put her through. I see that now. I didn't want to see it then. She stood. For a moment, she looked like she might say more. Then she simply walked away into the Lonsdale rain. That evening, I read the letter. Simple words. Genuine remorse. An apology that asked nothing in return. I gave it to Sarah. She read it, sat quietly for a long time, and said she'd share it with Lily when she was older. For now, it went into a folder. Evidence of possible change, to be evaluated with time. Martin's letter arrived 2 weeks later, forwarded through his lawyer. It was different. Blame-shifting, minimizing, claiming stress, claiming Sarah had been difficult, claiming things had escalated beyond his control. Sarah read it once, folded it neatly, and dropped it in the recycling bin. Some people learn, she said. Some people just learn to make excuses. Lily's 9th birthday fell on a Saturday in June. We celebrated at my townhouse. Small gathering. Sarah's new friends from work. A few families from Lily's school. No grand production. No designer decorations. Just cake and laughter and a golden retriever puppy named Comet, who immediately ate a piece of wrapping paper and had to be chased around the backyard. After the guests left, after Lily had fallen asleep on the couch with Comet curled against her legs, Sarah and I sat on the back deck. The evening was long the way June evenings are in Vancouver. Light lingering past 9, the mountains across the inlet still catching sun. "Dad," Sarah said, "I need to say something I should have said months ago." "You don't need to." "I do. You sat through 6 years of insults. Diane called you a nobody. Martin treated you like furniture. They mocked your house, your clothes, your life, and you never once corrected them. Never once said, actually, I spent 38 years as one of the most respected prosecutors in this province. Why? I sipped my tea. The mug was warm in my hands. Because I retired from being Crown Prosecutor Aldridge. I wanted to be your father. Just your father. Titles are temporary, Sarah. Family is what remains. But you could have stopped them. One sentence, and Diane would have. Would have what? Treated me with respect because of my job title? That's not respect, Sarah. That's calculation. I wanted to see who they were when they thought I was nobody. They showed me. She leaned her head against my shoulder. The way she used to when she was small. You taught me something this year. Quiet isn't weakness. You didn't need anyone to see your power for it to be real. I put my arm around her. You taught me something too. What? That walking away takes more courage than any courtroom argument I ever made. You walked out. You rebuilt. You're stronger than you know. She shook her head. You saved us. I helped. You saved yourself. Months turned. Sarah and Lily moved to a bright apartment near Commercial Drive. The graphic design business she'd rebuilt was growing. Lily thrived. She made friends easily, laughed loudly, played piano because she wanted to, not because anyone demanded perfection. She still made mistakes. She still kept going. That was the part that mattered. One autumn afternoon, David Chen called with news. Robert, thought you'd want to know. Diane Beaumont completed her probation. Clean record since the conviction. She's volunteering now at a women's shelter in Surrey, running financial literacy workshops for abuse survivors. I considered this. Rehabilitation or reputation management. Time would tell. Either way, the system had done its work. And Martin? Released on parole. Living in Calgary. No contact with Sarah or Lily. Condition of his release. Good. After hanging up, I sat in my living room. The walls held no commendations. No framed photographs with attorneys general. No visible evidence of 38 years spent in courtrooms prosecuting the worst of what people do to each other. What was on display was a crayon drawing stuck to the refrigerator with a maple leaf magnet. 3 figures standing on a green hill. A yellow dog beside them. Stars above. Underneath, in careful printing, my family. Grandpa, Mom, me, and Comet. That Friday, Sarah and Lily came for dinner. We made pasta together. Lily's job was stirring the sauce, which she did with enormous concentration and frequent tasting. Comet sat beneath the table, optimistic about falling food, the kitchen filled with steam and conversation, and the ordinary magic of people who love each other sharing a meal. Over dinner, Lily made an announcement. "Grandpa, I've decided what I want to be when I grow up. Tell me, a lawyer, like you, because you help people who can't help themselves. That's what you did for Mom and me." Sarah and I looked at each other across the table. "You can be anything you want, Lily. Lawyer, astronaut, artist, whatever makes you happy. Can I be all three?" I laughed. "In this country?" "Absolutely." After dinner, we bundled up and walked to the waterfront. The November air was cold but clear, rare for Vancouver, and the stars were visible above the North Shore Mountains. Lily had brought her telescope, the one I'd given her the previous Christmas, the gift Diane had dismissed as impractical. She set it up on the seawall and aimed it at the sky. "Grandpa, I found Jupiter. Come look." I looked through the eyepiece. The planet hung there, impossibly far, impossibly bright, accompanied by the tiny dots of its moons. Somewhere in Surrey, Diane Beaumont was leading a workshop, trying to become someone different. Somewhere in Calgary, Martin was rebuilding a life stripped of the wealth and status that had defined him. Both facing long roads, both dealing with consequences they'd never imagined when they'd dismissed a quiet man in a modest townhouse as someone beneath their notice. And here, on the seawall in North Vancouver, I watched my daughter and granddaughter discover Jupiter together. Justice, I'd learned over 38 years, wasn't about punishment. It was about balance restored, accountability met, space created for healing. Some people asked me afterward whether I'd planned everything from the moment I walked to the parking lot. The CRA inquiry, the real estate council investigation, Martin's embezzlement being uncovered. The truth was simpler than any conspiracy. I saw my granddaughter hurt. I reported it. I followed proper channels. I trusted the systems I'd spent a career serving. Everything else was consequence. The night air was sharp, but none of us wanted to go inside. Lily was searching for Saturn now, adjusting the telescope with practiced hands. Sarah stood beside me, her face peaceful in a way I hadn't seen in years. "Dad," she said quietly, "thank you for everything. I'm your father," I said. "This is what fathers do." Lily looked up from her telescope. "Grandpa, did you know that there are more stars in the universe than grains of sand on all the beaches on Earth?" "I've heard that. It's true. My teacher told us. That means there's always something new to find." "Then we'd better keep looking," I said. She smiled. The kind of smile that doesn't calculate safe distances. The kind that comes from a child who knows she is safe. She is loved, and the people around her will not let harm reach her again. I put my arm around her shoulders. Above us, the vast Canadian sky stretched from mountain to ocean, filled with more light than any of us could count. There is always more to discover. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. To hear the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for listening.